Welcome and thank you for joining me for this ISIA podcast. I'm Sean Leavy, President of the Irish Security Industry Association, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Paul Scallan, Chief Executive of the Private Security Authority, the regulator of the private security industry in Ireland. Paul, thank you for joining me today and for agreeing to put aside some time to discuss the work of the PSA, how it serves to protect the end user of security services, and to reflect on the collaborative relationship between us in the industry and you as the regulator of the industry.
Thank you, Sean. It's delighted to take part in this podcast. It's always good to talk to the industry and get the message out and give people an opportunity then to throw some questions at us. So looking forward to the next while.
You're very welcome. Paul, the PSA was established following the passing of the Private Security Services Act in 2004, and you started licensing security contractors in 2006 and security employees in 2007. Will you summarise for our listeners the areas of private security that are now licensed and the remaining sectors of the industry to be licensed?
Well, Sean, at the moment we have in the region of 1,800 contractor licenses in circulation across 12 sectors of the industry, and they would be the electronic security sectors of access control, CCTV and intruder alarm. We would also have the intruder alarm and CCTV monitoring areas, cash and transit, security guarding, locksmiths, private investigators, store supervisors, and then the event security sector, which is subdivided into two categories. On the employee side, we have 4 sectors licensed and roughly about 40,000 employee licenses out there. And those sectors are the cash and transit, the monitoring centres, again, security guarding, and door supervisors. We had hoped to license the event security sector last year, but obviously events overrun us. So hopefully that will happen when the entertainment industry opens up again, maybe later this year, or more likely, I think at this stage, maybe 2022. So that's what we have so far in terms of licensing. In terms of where we have to go, on the contractor side, we still have security consultants, and then the suppliers and installers of safes. They're the areas remaining there. We've done some work on the security consultant side, and the ISIA members have participated in that work. And I'd like to thank them for their participation and their help. We would expect to announce a licensing timetable for security consultants in the second half of this year. That's our plan at the moment. We, as I say, a lot of work done there. In terms of the safes piece, we have done a little bit of background work, and we will engage with the industry, I think, in the second half of the year to get moving again on that. I don't think we'll be announcing a time frame for licensing this year. Possibly again that'll be early next year when we'll announce the time frame there. On the
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead. So no, it's just I'm just listening to the PSA has come a long way since 2004, and it sounds like you have a roadmap to continue licensing outstanding areas or sectors within the industry. Sorry for butting in. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention on the employee side, which is probably where we have a roadmap, Sean, and that roadmap was set out in our strategic plan back in 2018. We had hoped actually to have licensing, certainly the contractors, completed at this stage, and to be a lot further down the road in terms of the individuals, employees. But I suppose various events, the pandemic being one, but also others, have impacted on that. As I mentioned, we have 4 sectors licensed on the employee side. And I suppose where we go next after we do the event is probably the big question. We've done a lot of work with the ISIA members and other representative bodies around locksmiths, and we're looking possibly at some form of traineeship for locksmiths, maybe recognised by SOLAS, which would be great for the industry, and hopefully we'll see some agreement on that before the end of the year. We're going to try and get our working group back together again in the coming weeks to talk about where we go with that one. The tricky one that's left for us, and the one which we've banged our head against for the last few years and wondering what's the best route to take, is around the electronic security sector, and whether we go down the apprenticeship route or not. And I know the ISIA are great supporters of the electronic security.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
And that. And I tell you, myself, some days I wake up and I think it's the one to go with, and then other days I wake up and I'm not so sure. And it's not that I don't support the apprenticeship. I don't think it's a great innovation. I think it's fantastic for the industry. But we, as a regulator, have to recognise all of the electronic security contractors that we have out there, and we have over 1,000 of them, and a lot of them don't work across all the sectors. They maybe just specialise in one, in CCTV or intruder alarm. Um, Most of our contractors don't get involved in fire, which is an element of the apprenticeship. And then we have contractors who install alarms and CCTV systems, which aren't covered really by that apprenticeship. They are, I suppose, the new I suppose wireless technology, which isn't covered really by the apprenticeship. And it's how to get all those groups together and agree what's best for the industry. And it's possibly, the solution is the apprenticeship plus some other elements of training for other areas. I think that's the big nut we're going to have to crack over the next few years, how we deal with those and how we address that piece for the electronic security sector. So that's where we are in terms of licensing at the moment and where we're going in the future.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. There's a lot of work left to be done there, and the apprenticeship is something that does need attention to bring it up to where we are with modern technology. You mentioned training. That leads me into my next question, Paul. People are key to the success of any industry, and training contributes significantly to people's competency. To what extent does training contribute to both contractors and individuals becoming licensed?
Yes, Sean, well, as you say, people are the key to success in the security industry, and training is an important component of the licensing process. And that importance is reinforced by our legislation, which states that the PSA will specify the qualification and the training requirements for the granting of licenses. So we have a very important role spelled out for us there in the legislation. And the skills which the employees gain through that training provides them with the confidence to deliver a professional security service. And that professionalism then, I suppose, reassures the public as to the quality of security service on offer. And I think we've seen, training has contributed to the transformation of the industry over the last 10 years during regulation. In terms of the importance of training over the past 2 to 3 years, we've focused greatly on the provision of training and the training providers. We would have received a lot of complaints about the quality of training and how it was being delivered in the past. So we've got the training providers together in a trainers forum. We monitor them. We carry out inspections of the trainers themselves, and we also carry out inspections of the courses where we actually attend some of the courses to sit in and see what's being delivered. We recently launched a portal for the training providers, which captures all the details of courses and the people who complete the courses and the trainers. So that has helped us in training, and that shows our commitment in terms of the training area. All the employees seeking a license have to complete the prescribed trainings for their sector. And recently there we would have revoked over 100 licenses where people didn't complete the training. And this was from dispensations we gave during the COVID period when training wasn't available. And then when training got back up and running, these people didn't complete the training. So we've revoked those licenses. So again, that shows just, the emphasis that we put on training. There's also training obligations on the contractors, and these are set out in the standards that we use for contractor licensing. And they must be met by the contractor if they're going to get a license and maintain and keep their licenses. Contractors have to have a documented training policy. They have to provide induction training for new entrants and provide refresher training for staff. There's site-specific training for security guards and door supervisors, which is a very important element of training for them. And then I suppose, where risk assessments are done and risks are identified, training has to be provided to mitigate those risks that are identified. So training is a big piece for us. It's probably something in the past that we haven't focused a lot on, leaving it to other agencies and others to monitor and look at. But as I say, in recent years, we've become more involved, and I think we will be getting more and more involved, and we want to integrate training more into the licensing process over the years to come.
Thanks for that, Paul. Following on from that, I think you've answered half of my next question, but
Sorry
I was
about
just
that.
going to ask you, how would you like to see the training requirements progress in the coming years? Is that PSA taking a more upfront role in training as opposed to the training bodies?
Yeah, I think there will still be training bodies and training providers, Sean, but definitely we want to take a more upfront role in training. As I say, our legislation gives us a specific role there, and we want to make sure that we're meeting that role. I suppose I should say we will have a new strategic plan at the end of this year, which will take us up to 2026, and there may be training requirements in that plan that I haven't even thought about or considered at this stage. So we might find things happening over the next couple of years that we haven't planned for. At the start of next year, we will have two new QQI courses for the door and guarding sector and for the event security sectors. And the ISIA would have participated in the development of these courses some years back. So that's a big development that will come in. That's the first new training for the sectors since licensing got up and running. So it'll be a very important piece. We're also working on developing physical intervention skills training, something that is absent from the industry, and I think that's a critical piece of work. And it should eliminate some of those ugly scenes that we see from time to time of security personnel, let's say, being overzealous with members of the public and clientele and so forth. So that's another big element for us. And then we also want to look at the area of upskilling. It is something that we talked about since licensing began, but have never involved ourselves in, and upskilling across all the sectors for security staff. So that is certainly something we'll be looking at in the next few years. And it won't just be around security skills. I think it'll also look at some wider training in societal matters. And what I'm thinking about there is things like suicidal awareness, drug awareness, awareness of child trafficking. And the child trafficking one is one that we've actually looked at already. We know that there was a very successful course rolled out to the hospitality sector in recent years in that area. And we've been working with the people responsible for that course, MECPATs, in designing a course for the security industry. And we'll probably make some announcement of that in the coming weeks and talk to the ISIA and other stakeholders about the implementation of that course.
I really look forward to hearing more about that. I think that's an excellent target for the PSA. I think training and upskilling is crucial to our industry, no matter what part of the private security industry that you work in. But yeah, there's some great plans there, Paul. Really excellent work if you can get it all over the line.
Yeah, and getting it over the line will be the challenge, Sean, because I suppose first of all, people think that the security industry is a homogenous industry, but as I mentioned at the start, we have 12 different sectors. They've all got competing needs and different requirements, and that can be a big challenge for us to meet all those demands that are put upon us. So
I think that's where the roadmaps come in, so we can actually see what the PSA is working on, and as an industry body, help where we can and provide some feedback as well. So yeah, I think it's great to hear that you're working on those projects.
Yeah. So as I say, we hope to announce the MECPATs one, the child trafficking one, shortly. We've done a lot of work on that. We're actually, our own staff are testing the system at the moment. So we'll be in touch with the ISIA about that shortly.
Very good. Paul, when you reflect on the PSA's history since its initial establishment, what do you view as having been the key benefits of licensing for the public, commercial clients of the industry, and for the private security industry itself?
Well, it's 15 years this month, Sean, since the first contractor licenses were issued back in April 2006, as you mentioned earlier. And I think really to answer the question, it's probably worth reflecting back on the state of the industry prior to regulation, because I think some of our listeners, probably don't remember those days. It was, the industry didn't have a great reputation at that time. There was a succession of high-profile, bad stories, bad news stories. it focused the attention of the public and of government on the industry. There were contractors, who weren't paying their taxes, who weren't paying the ERO, who were undercutting and undermining the legitimate operators that were out there. And, there were criminal elements, working on the edge of the industry and probably even more
On the fringes, yes.
at the time. So
I think that was systemic, though. If you look at other jurisdictions around the world, that was there, and I think the introduction of legislation absolutely reduced that, and to the point where it's virtually not there anymore.
Yeah. So as I say, you asked me the benefits. I think just have to compare now to maybe 20 years back, and I think you straight away see the benefits and the transformation that has taken place in the industry. And I've seen that myself. There's been a great transformation in the industry over that 20-year period.
I think our industry is perceived to be more professional as well.
Definitely, it's more professional. I think it's more confident as well. I think particularly when it's you see the services that ISIA members are delivering to some of the world's leading multinationals and so forth, and they're providing services at the top of the international ladder, and the best of services. And I think, well, regulation isn't going to take the credit for that. I think regulation has helped the industry, meet those standards and hit those higher levels across different sectors. So I think, that shows, some of the I suppose, the success of regulation over that times. Like the black economy in the industry, I won't say it's gone completely, but it's virtually non-existent. There's probably pockets of it around the country, but it's certainly not at the levels that I can recall, from when I started in the PSA. And I think clients of the industry have confidence in the industry. That's what I would say, as do the public. We don't see those bad news stories anymore. And certainly I know from talking to the Department of Justice and also to other colleagues around other government departments, they see regulation as a success.
I fully agree. It's been a huge success.
And the demand on public resources, just as demands on the Garda Síochána, they're not as great as they would have been in the past to deal with criminal elements or to deal with, things like the big CIT attacks that we would have seen, or to deal with some of the, nighttime economy issues around door supervisors and so forth that we would have come across back 15, 20 years ago. So I think, you can mark success in a number of areas, I think.
Yeah, I can see that relationship and that support between the Garda Síochána and the security industry in everyday life. Whether it be museums, walking into shopping centres, the private security guards are playing a societal role every day of the week. You can't not but walk into a security guard, whether it's in a shop or a business or a multinational. So yeah, I definitely believe that the PSA has done a fantastic job since its introduction in 2004.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to say we've done a fantastic job. I think the industry has done a fantastic job. We've contributed to that.
We all play our part. Yes,
we all played our part, and I think the industry has played a big part. We've got a lot of flack over the years in terms of regulation and the standards, being too high and so forth. But in fairness to the industry, they've met those standards, with a bit of encouragement and support from ourselves. So, a lot of the credit really goes to the industry as well.
Yeah, I think it's a partnership, and it's a good partnership, and I'll speak to it later on. But I think as an industry, we work very well with our regulator, with the Private Security Authority, and I think that's enabled us to get where we are today, and hopefully will enable us to continue to improve our industry going forward.
Yeah, hopefully, and look, as I say, I've always been open to meeting with industry representatives, with the ISIA and others. I like to think I have a good relationship with all, and that if people have issues or concerns, or they something they want to discuss, they know where to find me and how to contact me.
That's really interesting, Paul. I know our listeners will relate to those benefits, and especially our listeners in the private security industry. Paul, the PSA was established to regulate the industry, to protect the end user of security services and the public. Can you tell our audience about how you ensure compliance with the regulation?
Well, I suppose the area of compliance and enforcement has probably been the one that where we faced the most criticism over the years. Um, and we've tried to address those criticisms. And look, they've been well founded. And I'm not going to rehash them here because I think we're all very familiar with
Mm.
them. But over the past 18 months, we've invested strongly in our inspectorate. We've added two more inspectors to our in-house team. We've added two more staff to our compliance teams in Tipperary, in our headquarters there in Tipperary. Um, and we've used external inspectors, something that we haven't done previously, on a large scale, where they've gone out and around the country knocking on businesses' doors to find out who's providing their various security services, and they licensed providers or unlicensed providers, and that's been very successful. And we've also engaged, expertise where we've needed it in terms of our compliance, in financial areas and in technical areas. So that's something that we've addressed, those criticisms that we have received over the years. In terms of our approach to compliance, I would probably say it's not dissimilar to the four E's that An Garda Síochána are using at the moment in terms of the pandemic. It's going to be a case of engage, explain, encourage, and enforce. So we
Mm.
will always take the approach of giving somebody an opportunity to mend their ways if we find them, in breach of regulations or in breach of the law. We'll try and encourage them before we actually use our enforcement powers. And I know that this isn't always popular with the industry or with some contractors who would like us to enforce in all cases. But
Mm.
we've learned from experience that that approach doesn't really work. Work. And particularly when you take somebody to the courts, which is always what people are demanding, more prosecutions. Judges are reluctant to prosecute unless there's a very strong case. And if people have shown that they make efforts to regulate or to get on side, judges tend not to prosecute or to give a successful conviction in those cases. So we've learned from that, and we've adopted our compliance actions accordingly. In terms of the actual work we do, I suppose it's divided into three elements. I suppose there's the intelligence led compliance matters, the investigations, which are investigations that we would take on because we have concerns or there's been red flags for some reasons. And then there's the inspection work, which is probably the routine quality control inspections where we call into a contractor just to inspect our records, make sure they're compliant with the standards. So
Mm.
they're the three areas. And I suppose a lot of our work comes from the intelligence side, and a lot of that intelligence would come from the industry. Um, intelligence volumes have been dropping in recent years, so I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign. Does it mean we've got things right? Maybe we are, or maybe just people are fed up reporting. I'm not sure how to read them. We would like to think it's because we've been successful in that area.
I think COVID over the last year has obviously like we're not out there installing.
Yeah,
We're only doing from an installation perspective. And my colleagues in the other parts of the private security industry are only carrying out essential services. So hopefully that won't up. You won't get an
yeah,
uptick
yeah.
when the country opens up, so
So
that we are
again,
all doing a good job and are all working within the legislation. But only time will tell.
one of the interesting things, Sean, is that we what we call the Monday morning reports or the Monday morning
Mm.
we um, we don't get those anymore, and these would be usually a mother or father ringing up because or sending an email because their poor son or daughter didn't get into the nightclub on a Saturday night or a Friday night. Um,
Mm.
it's not really because of the doorman. Maybe it was more because of the state that the son and or daughter was in.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we would have always seen a few of them on a Monday morning. They've definitely dried up in the last 12 months of the pandemic.
Yeah. Um, Moving on, the work of the PSA can only be achieved when you engage with the industry and work collaboratively with private security contractors. How does an organisation like the ISIA contribute to that?
Yeah, and the PSA is always involved the industry and the ISA in its work. And
Mm.
as I mentioned previously, I'm a strong believer in consulting with the industry in these areas. Um, like I'm a civil servant. I'm not from the security industry. I don't have, and my colleagues here in the PSA aren't, experts from the industry. We can engage experts when we need to, but we rely on the ISIA and the ISI members to guide us through the industry and to advise us and support us in that regard. And like the ISIA have been great supporters of the PSA, and look, they've been supporters of regulation even prior to the establishment of the PSA. ISIA members have sat on our board. To the best of my recollection, they've been involved in all the working groups we've established over the past 15 years or so. And you yourself, Sean, I know have been involved in a number of those groups
I
over
have. I have.
that time. So look, we have a very strong bond with the ISIA and with other industry stakeholders. We can't achieve, we couldn't achieve what we have achieved, and we can't achieve what we want to achieve in the future without that, you know, close relationship with the ISIA and the ISIA members. Um, I think it's great that I know many ISIA members who I could pick up the phone to and ring if I needed clarification on a particular issue that I'm struggling with. And I think that the strength of that relationship that we have with the ISIA and its members, and the ISIA is very important to me and to the PSA when we do our work. And that relationship, will continue to grow. One of the things that we had hoped to do last year, and unfortunately it didn't get going, and I think I've spoken to you, Sean, previously about this, was the establishment of stakeholder forums.
Yes.
We want to establish those forums across all the sectors and some regional ones as well. And those forums would allow the industry to feed into the PSA the issues of the day, and that there would be a two-way communication between ourselves and the industry. So, as I say, that was something that didn't get done last year, and hopefully, it might start up later this year, but certainly it will be something that we'll be putting again into the strategic plan for the next 4 years, because it's something I think we need to establish. I think it would be a great strength for both the PSA, but also for the industry to have that close working relationship.
Yeah, I fully agree. Those stakeholder meetings and will be fantastic for our industry, and it's imperative that our association, the ISIA, continues to build on relationships with all the industry bodies, and obviously the PSA would be one of those industry bodies that we have and will continue to have a very good relationship going forward. You spoke about your strategy. Your strategy sets the focus up to 2021, and of course the board of the PSA will determine the direction that the organisation takes following on from that point. But what do you anticipate being key areas of focus for you as a regulator of the private security industry?
Yeah, and I suppose Sean, the new strategic plan will run from 2022 up to 2026, and that really will set the strategy for that period. I suppose there are a number of areas where we're kind of focusing already in advance of that. As you'll be aware, the Minister for Justice is bringing forth legislation in terms of the enforcement of court orders around repossessions. So
I think that's something that, sorry for cutting across, I think that's something that's absolutely needed. I know my other colleagues in the ISIA would stand behind me in saying that it's something that which needs to be looked at urgently in this country. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, well, that bill actually, we've been informed by the department that bill will actually go to government in the next couple of weeks during April, with a view to bringing it to the Oireachtas shortly thereafter. So I think we are going to see that legislation move over the next few weeks and months. So we're going to see that come forward and
very good
past it. So I think that's going to be a major piece of work for us in the new strategy. One of the other things that has come on our radar recently, and it is actually in our legislation, but it's something that we never focused on because we didn't think there was a demand for it, has been the use of dogs and security dogs. And we didn't think it was very widespread in the industry, but unfortunately, recently, for some reason, our inspectors have come across a number of instances, a considerable number of instances, where security dogs have been used, particularly around building sites and so forth. So we think that's an area that we just might have to look at in terms of regulation, and we're doing a bit of work there at the moment. So that's another thing that you might find will fall into the plan if it's not even dealt with beforehand, because we are a bit concerned about the developments in that area. So there are two things that will be there, and I suppose the stakeholder forums will be something that we will look at them already. one of the other things that we haven't tackled, and I've spoken to before at ISIA for it, is around certification and the whole model of certification that we use. As you know, we have real concerns about certification, particularly about the non-compliance rates that we find when our own inspectors
Yes.
to
Yeah.
industries, and that which suggests to us that the certification model isn't working, certainly not working the way we would like it to work. So I think we are going to see a change there. We've already had a subcommittee of our board look at that. They've made some proposals in that regard. So that's something that will certainly change, and something over the next few years will be certification. Um, and then we also need to look back, I suppose, over the last 15 years and say, right, regulation was established with a purpose 15, 20 years ago. It was what the concerns were at that time. Is that same regulatory model needed for the next 15, 20 years? Is there different concerns now that we need to address? And I think that's an important piece of work that needs to be done. And we'll talk to the department about that, because the department, as our parent, is going to have to play a big role in that. So I think a whole review of the regulatory environment is needed as well. So that will be another big piece for the years ahead. Um, and then I suppose it's really open to the industry itself to come forward with ideas. As I mentioned, we still have a new strategic plan. Unfortunately, the time frame between a new board and a new strategic plan is very short, because there's legal requirements there. So I think the ISIA, and particularly its different divisions, it might be no harm now thinking ahead and thinking about what they would like to see over the next 4 to 5 years, and coming to us even in advance of the formal request for observations or submissions on a plan, and to give us their thoughts now, so that we can be thinking and putting something together for the new board when they take their seats later this year.
Yeah, there's a lot of work in there, Paul, and absolutely, we'll help the PSA where we can. I think it's very timely and prudent to do a look ahead, probably longer than 2026. And yes, I think if we can help and put forward ideas, we'll definitely do. We will do, and I think the stakeholder forums that you mentioned will help with that also.
Yeah.
Paul, it's been fantastic this morning reflecting on the work of the PSA over the years. The private security industry has benefited greatly from the introduction of minimum standards to our industry. We may not have always agreed on everything, but there's always been a clear communication between the PSA and the industry, which can be seen here today. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you for your support during my term as president, especially during the last year, which has been very, very challenging with respect to COVID-19. The PSA were truly a great support to our members and to the industry as a whole. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean, and I wish you well when you step down and get back to the day job. And that you've had a challenging 2 years, but in fairness, you've handled them very well, and you've been a great president for the ISIA during that period. And I look forward to working with you in whatever role we find ourselves in the future, but also working with all the ISIA members for the benefit of the industry. So thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
You're very welcome, and thank you for your kind words. Thanks, Paul.